The pace of change in our country right now is breathtaking. It seems like every day a new policy focuses on America's culture wars, and we're as divided as ever. One of the social issues raging right now is the move to eliminate decades-old policies and practices stemming from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We've come to call them DEI. At their best, they are voluntary policies and practices aimed at ensuring that opportunities are available to every American. These practices are varied and are a little squishy to define. Supporters say DEI efforts can help create workplaces and a society that embraces diverse people and perspectives, where everyone has equal say, pay, and status. They say DEI can help us get closer to American ideals of participatory democracy. Supporters say when we value diversity, we can address deeper issues of bias and discrimination together. For business, the benefits include employee advancement and retention and engaged customers. When institutions can show that underrepresented minorities are given equal access to advance, DEI can be a success. While that's a pretty basic description of DEI, even supporters admit it can be hard to define and evaluate. For instance, without any quality control, DEI efforts can come off as haphazard, white-shaming, consciousness-raising events in an unregulated industry. DEI can also show up as an under-resourced division of a company's human resources department, unable to create organizational change that lasts. Still, diversity, equity, and inclusion have become so ubiquitous in the workplace, the effects are far-reaching.
The world is evolving rapidly, yet we're not embracing inclusion at the same pace.
We're all different, and our differences can generate various points of view and contribute to creativity and innovation.
This corporate training video is just one example of the kind of materials employees are often required to watch when they're first hired.
Due to its subtlety, unconscious bias leads to unintentional exclusion. But you have the ability to influence change right now. So commit to being consciously inclusive, respect differences, be accountable, and embrace possibilities. Imagine the impact you can have.
One person.
One gesture.
One moment at a time.
For decades, polls have shown that most people believe equal opportunity in the workplace is good. But now some research shows a growing number of Americans see diversity initiatives as unfair. The conservative Heritage Foundation think tank has been influential in its opposition to DEI. It's out to sink the DEI ship and says diversity efforts are an all-powerful discriminatory ideology that's taken over government, education, and the workplace. With the election of President Donald Trump, an anti-DEI spark has caught on. American companies are pulling back, and some of the legal underpinnings, like affirmative action laws, face challenges. Critics say DEI policies are a set of discriminatory practices that give preferential treatment to women and people of color at the expense of white men. They say DEI practices and training programs in the government, military, and workplace are ineffective at improving productivity in a diverse workforce. They believe standards are lowered to accommodate hiring women and minority workers. I'm Trey Kay from West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX. This is Us and Them, the show that tells the stories about the things that divide Americans. Today, we look at DEI, its history, and the efforts to erase it. To illustrate some of the complexities of DEI, we begin this episode with a look at this project, Us and Them. We're a small, all-white team with a handful of producers who pull these stories together. Most of our producers are women. A few years ago, one of our funders asked us to create a DEI advisory board, including people of color in West Virginia. The goal was to get input and feedback from a diverse board of advisors. So we created a board with 6 members, all community leaders who I know well, some of whom you've met as guests on this show. Together, they have deep experience on corporate, nonprofit, and community boards. Felicia Bush is on our advisory board. She says she was initially skeptical to join because it was an ad hoc funding requirement.
I was very concerned about whether or not you're wanting to check a box or whether or not, you really want, because I have been asked to participate in things where people did not want my opinion. The difference is I didn't stay.
As a Black woman, Felicia says she is sometimes invited onto boards because of the color of her skin and not because of her strengths and talents as an owner of a successful mental health agency. Felicia says she's heard many stories about Black and brown professionals on boards whose only true role was to help the organization, quote, check the box.
I have a young employee who's an African-American male, and he's served on 3 different boards. 2 of them were local foundation funding boards, and he was specifically sought because he was African-American. It was when the one African-American was leaving the board, and they're like, we got to replace him with an African-American. So they were pretty specific about that, and then he felt like they didn't really want to hear from him. He expressed that he couldn't wait till his tenure on that board ended. He felt there was an unfair distribution of the work and that it was really just to check that box.
Another member of Us and Them's DEI advisory board is Elliot Hicks. He says that kind of tokenism, as it's called, is definitely an issue, but not something he's experienced personally. For Elliot, joining boards and showing up is still worth it.
It's good to have diverse voices in the room.
Elliot is a lawyer in Charleston. He says he's willing to serve on the Us and Them DEI board because he feels the show seeks out diverse perspectives on issues.
When you have some people of color on boards in organizations that they might not show up in numbers for, it helps the thinking process and makes the ideas that come out of there more palatable to more people. And so that's why it's to the advantage of the organization to do this and to continue those efforts. And it's to the advantage of our state and not push that aside just because we don't have a lot of minorities here.
That's true. We don't have a lot of minorities here. In West Virginia, African Americans make up just under 4% of this predominantly white state. It's the second least diverse state in the country behind Maine. Elliot and Felicia support diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've experienced the powerful effects that some DEI practices can have. For example, Felicia has a diverse staff that's split about evenly between Black and white colleagues. She told us about how during a staff retreat, they all took part in a privilege walk. It's a fairly common exercise designed to help people learn how life experience can create privilege.
The idea was that you ask some questions about people's experiences and people move forward based on whether or not they've had that experience or not.
We found examples of privilege walks on YouTube that can help explain.
I'm going to be asking you a series of 35 questions. If your parents work nights and weekends to support your family, take one step back.
So it's a situation where you're given certain things, so you move forward or backward based on your access to certain privileges, like education, like books in your house, like a parent who went to college or a parent who was incarcerated. So you move back and forth based on these different components. The point is that we don't all start from the same place. So it is absurd to think that we can land in the same place.
This exercise is representative of the kind of consciousness-raising activities that can be common in DEI programs. They're designed to show the way we benefit or are hindered by access to opportunity. Felicia says she facilitated Privilege Walk workshops with 2 other boards she's on. They were popular. Word spread, and she got offers to bring the training to 5 more organizations.
People were coming from the outside who had seen it, and they're like, we can get that and check that box because we held a privilege walk, And so they sought for me to come and provide it. They, offered to pay me to come and provide it. They went through the whole thing, signed contracts and all of that. And then they all backed out of it. They all backed out of it, which I thought it was very telling. Now, in this current atmosphere, as people are jumping off that ship as fast as they can, that shows how invested they were in actual diversity, equity, and inclusion, as opposed to just checking the box.
We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. And our country will be woke no longer.
As soon as he took office in January 2025, President Donald Trump signed many executive orders, including one aimed at dismantling DEI. The connection between Donald Trump and the conservative movement to eliminate DEI will be explored later in the show. Diversity efforts have never really had consistent backing from Washington, says sociologist John Scretany from the University of California, San Diego.
I think that the level of enforcement depended on who was in the White House, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat. If it's a Republican, not as much enforcement. If it's a Democrat, more enforcement.
Scretany says today's diversity efforts evolved from the landmark Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. Enforcement of the civil rights laws fell to a newly created agency called the EEOC. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Scretany says it was the EEOC's job to investigate discrimination complaints.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had thousands of complaints. And like every government agency, they wanted to know if they were doing a good job or not. And so what they started to do was collect data on how employers were doing regarding hiring, especially African Americans, but they also looked at Latinos and Asian Americans, American Indians, and women. So basically what you started to get created was an apparatus of government collection of statistics where you started to see people according to categories.
Everyone, including government contractors, who made up 1/3 of the government workforce in the 1960s, was complying with the Civil Rights Act, as well as an executive order issued by President Lyndon Johnson. It required employers to take what was then undefined affirmative action to make sure everyone was getting an equal opportunity to get ahead.
Over time, to make a long story short, these administrators began to come upon a solution, a tool where employers had to basically promise to hire certain percentages of minorities and women by a certain time period. It was called goals and timetables. And this is the beginning of what you begin to see as DEI.
By the 1980s, Scretany says enforcement of hiring quotas was out of favor, and the idea of diversity was in.
And the Reagan administration started to pull back on enforcement. They started to say, you know what, we're not really going to push this too hard. But what was interesting back then in the 80s was the companies, through their HR departments, pressed on. And they began to make the argument that it's actually good for business to have more minorities and women in the workforce. And that's where you started to get the idea that diversity is good. Diversity is good for the bottom line. That bringing in diverse voices means that you're going to have richer ideas, better conversations. You're going to understand more diverse markets because you have employees from those markets. So really the 80s was the rise of the idea of diversity as an end in itself. And the DEI is really pretty recent. That's just in the past 10 years or so, I think, that these departments started to rebrand themselves as diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in practice, it didn't mean that they were doing that much different. The goal was still the same. The goal was to bring in more diverse voices, more minorities and women.
While many workplaces have become more diverse in the 6 decades since the Civil Rights Act, some employees still face discrimination and do not see an equal playing field in the workplace. In fact, a 2023 Pew Research survey shows Black Americans still earn less than the U.S. worker overall. There's a gender pay gap as well. For every dollar a white man makes, a white woman makes about 82 cents, and a Black woman makes 63 cents. Black unemployment is double the rate of U.S. workers overall, and Black workers continue to say they experience discrimination in hiring, pay, and promotions. Scretany says how DEI efforts are measured is important.
There is research that looks at what succeeds and what fails. One of the things that succeeds is when you have managers at employers who are paying attention to this, who are assigning mentors to minority workers, making sure that they feel heard, making it a part of the way that they do business.
Scretany points out the research is also clear about the pitfalls of DEI. They include the check-the-box mentality Felicia Bush talked about earlier. But they can also include workshops on topics like unconscious bias.
Where you don't get results is when you have so-called diversity training, where they get all the white men, especially, and they say, oh, you have unconscious bias. You have, you need to learn and you need to change your ways. You need to change your thinking. Even if they take that in, they tend to forget a lot of the lessons after a few days. And a lot of folks rebel against it. And they say, really? Well, I don't think I'm a bad guy. Screw this.
It's this kind of shaming, intentional or unintentional, that conservative politicians and the Trump administration are rebelling against. Programs and activities that ask white people to examine their privilege and biases.
You do have white people feeling frustrated. The sense that they're being displaced, that their position at the top is being lost. And I do think that's part of the story.
As conservative and white discomfort with DEI continued to grow in the 1990s and 2000s, Black voices have reminded Americans that this country is not colorblind or beyond racism. After a series of killings of Black boys, men, and women by white police officers in recent years, the Black Lives Matter movement took to the streets to protest the unequal treatment of Black people by police. Then, there was the murder of George Floyd on May 25, 2020.
Overnight, nationwide unrest.
We don't want to loot. That's not what we out here for. But we do want justice and we want equality. And if we don't get that, we're going to be out here.
Dozens of American cities up in flames after some protests turned into riots.
And more chaos in Minneapolis, where Officer Derek Chauvin is now charged with murder after he was seen with his knee on Floyd's neck moments before his death on Memorial Day.
In the aftermath of Floyd's death and the riots that followed, American culture shifted. The pendulum had swung. Suddenly, books about white privilege, white fragility, and anti-racism were on every liberal's bedside table. People were talking about race openly, calling it a reckoning. And DEI took off like a rocket. Corporate CEOs wanted to show their support for the Black community. They went public with full-throated assurances and commitments that they would address inequities in their workplaces and communities. In the past 5 years, one economic report suggests America's Fortune 1000 companies pledged more than $340 billion to promote racial diversity. It wasn't 100% altruistic. The effort was designed to attract more diverse suppliers, workers, and customers.
Target Chairman and CEO Brian Cornell is with us now to discuss his diversity goals. Bravo to you for sitting down and listening. Many CEOs give it lip service, but you certainly seem to put your money where your mouth is.
One company that very publicly embraced diversity was the national retailer Target, based in Minneapolis. This is Target's CEO Brian Cornell on CBS News in 2022.
And I will always remember having a Zoom call right after George Floyd's murder and seeing a screen after screen after screen on this Zoom call of Black leaders with tears in their eyes, talking about the challenges they had been facing and the tough conversations they had had with family members, their kids. Yeah. It was a very painful conversation. Very painful. But they helped inspire all of us to say, we've got to stand up and do more.
I think there was a moment when Target legitimately could talk about being a leader and that, people were making deliberate decisions to shop at Target.
That's Yahuru Williams. He's a professor of history and law at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. He also directs the Racial Justice Initiative at St. Thomas.
Target was having impact in community. They were recruiting from some of the best universities in the country, also from historically Black colleges and universities. Incredible talents who wanted to work for Target because Target was saying, we embrace this as part of our core identity. So they were getting that internal benefit. They were also getting the external benefit of loyalty within community, brand recognition with these efforts that kind of put them at the top of the heap, particularly here in Minnesota following the Floyd killing. When you walked into a Target and it was obvious that they had reimagined supplier diversity, they had reimagined the store layout, they had thought about and bought in diverse suppliers, and you were seeing that on the shelves in the store itself.
Fast forward to 2025.
Technology companies made big cuts to those DEI programs.
Lowe's is the latest company to roll back DEI efforts.
We have more breaking news. Target announcing it is rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the company.
Done away with or rolled back on DEI initiatives. You also got McDonald's, Ford,
Just
Meta,
days after Donald Trump's executive order banning DEI, several large companies, including Amazon, Disney, Ford, McDonald's, Meta, and yes, Target, and many more, announced they would scale back or eliminate their DEI initiatives. Some large companies, including Costco, Salesforce, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Pinterest, and others, continue their DEI programs. But the list of companies abandoning DEI is long and getting longer. With companies dropping DEI like a hot potato, I wondered about the depth of Target's commitment. Here's Professor Williams again.
There was a real fear that in the aftermath of the Trump executive orders and Target's announcement, that was just going to all go away. And you had this kind of visceral reaction to that by those in community who said, well, what does that mean? You made this promise and we've made this progress together. And if you walk away from this work, where does that leave us?
Since Target's announcement, there have been angry calls for boycotts, especially in the Black community. I asked Williams what's driving Target's decision.
Fear.
Fear of what?
The Trump administration and the inevitable backlash and concern over running afoul of a federal government now, which quite frankly seems intent on pursuing and punishing opponents. And they might have done the calculus that maybe we can continue this work if we fly under the radar and just try to do it in a way that makes us less of a target, no pun intended. And yet, in fact, what that did was make them much more of a target within community.
We contacted Target to comment for this story, but never heard back from them. Williams says corporate diversity programs like Target's were not designed with the kind of durability necessary to weather pressure. He says the current and inevitable backlash against DEI is part of a historical, never-ending loop, a cycle of recurring backlashes.
You're waiting for the next inflection point. You're waiting for the next moment where the nation's consciousness is awakened to the danger. And we then pour resources in only to walk away from that work when it becomes inconvenient. We're in the same loop when it comes to issues of equity and justice in our country. We have these moments where people are shocked to the quick. They want to do something to deal with it. And then very quickly, they lose the will and the momentum. And we find ourselves back in this cycle.
Coming up after a break, West Virginia lawmakers are taking their cues from Washington.
We're going to do the right thing, and we're going to make sure that West Virginia always stands for freedom, the rule of law, and the American ideal. We're going to keep going. This is just the beginning of our effort to root out DEI.
But some West Virginians feel the rhetoric is not just political, it's personal.
We're not just going to roll over and say, okay, all is lost. We can't do anything. We're back in slavery. We no longer have the right to vote. We don't have the right to speak. We no longer have our constitutional rights. No, we're going to push back.
That's after a break. You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part with a grant from the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation and the CRC Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
Hey, it's Trey, and this is Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. It seems like the pushback against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs came fast and furious after President Donald Trump's 2025 inauguration.
My administration has taken action to abolish all discriminatory diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense, and these are policies that were absolute nonsense throughout the government and the private sector.
But actually, you can look at Trump's current actions as part of an ongoing campaign that's been active in state legislatures, the courts, and social media platforms for a few years now.
All right, guys, it's Robbie Starbuck. We have another company to expose today. You guys and myself, we have changed the woke policies and eliminated them at some of the biggest companies on earth. Today's not a change story, though.
Conservative activists like Robbie Starbuck are successfully using their influence on social media to push major companies like Coors, Lowe's, Toyota, and many more to pull back or eliminate their DEI policies. A handful of conservative legal groups like America First Legal, run by Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, have been going after corporate DEI programs in the courts. The Washington Post found just one of these conservative groups has filed more than 100 anti-DEI lawsuits since 2021. Then in 2023, the movement got a boost from the United States Supreme Court.
We'll hear argument next in case 20-1199, Students for Fair Admissions versus the President and Fellows of Harvard College. Mr. Norris?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. Grutter assumed that universities could use race in a narrowly tailored way if they just did it like Harvard. But this court never had any evidence
In its
Harvard.
Fair versus Harvard decision, the court effectively ended the practice of affirmative action in college and university admissions. In doing so, the court overturned its previous 2003 ruling, allowing race as a factor in student admission decisions. While the new Supreme Court decision applies only to college and university admissions, some have seized on it as justification to eliminate DEI in every area of American life and institutions, including private business. The Supreme Court ruling helped ignite the DEI culture war. With President Trump's executive orders and the threats of legal action against public and private institutions, the conservative majority in Washington has created a powerful anti-DEI juggernaut, and conservative lawmakers across the country are hopping on. To date, more than 30 states have considered or are currently looking at anti-DEI legislation. Half those states have already passed such laws. Hey, just a note before we go on, the battle over DEI is about many things, including how words are being used. DEI opponents use the word woke a lot, and you'll hear that coming up in a bit. In case you're not familiar, woke is a term dating back to the 1960s and 70s, meaning to stay alert to social and racial discrimination and injustice. More recently, woke has become a slur, and some conservative political leaders use it as an insult against anything or anyone considered liberal or progressive. That's how woke has become a conservative catch-all moniker for DEI programs.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Morrisey.
We're in West Virginia now at the inauguration of newly elected Republican Governor Patrick Morrisey.
Thank you, everyone. Please have a seat.
During his inauguration speech in January 2025, Morrisey praised President Trump as an honorary West Virginian and made his own pledge against DEI.
We'll teach our kids civics, and we will eliminate the woke virus from the schools. And that means starting now, there will be no more DEI. No more radical agendas, no more brainwashing, no more confusion about the differences between boys and girls.
One of Governor Morrisey's first acts in office was to sign his own executive order, eliminating DEI across West Virginia state government, including public and charter schools, colleges and universities, agencies, boards, and departments. A couple of weeks after the governor signed that order, West Virginia University, the largest university and employer in West Virginia, announced it was immediately closing its Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Governor Morrisey put up a video congratulating WVU on its decision.
Here in West Virginia, we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to make sure that West Virginia always stands for freedom, the rule of law, and the American ideal. We're going to keep going. This is just the beginning of our effort to root out DEI. That's going to happen more and more in the weeks and months ahead.
The next step for Governor Morrisey was to introduce his own bill for lawmakers to pass and codify the executive order into state law. The bill restricts anything that gives preferential treatment to anyone based on race, color, sex, ethnicity, and national origin. The legislation holds harmless teachers and school staff who refuse to use the preferred gender pronouns of a student. It also creates a grievance procedure for parents to file complaints against teachers. The Republican majority state legislature voted to pass the measure.
I look at this as a day that we can actually do this. We can end diversity, equity, and inclusion because we don't need it anymore.
This is Republican State Senator Scott Fuller speaking on the bill during a floor vote. In the state Senate, there are just 2 Democrats out of 34 members. All but 5 of the senators are white men. There are no African Americans in the West Virginia Senate.
I don't know where this came from, this narrative that we are a racist, systemically racist country, that we don't give equality to women or to different religions or whatever the case may be. I grew up and there was never talk of racism. Does it exist? I'm sure it does. This is not a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect society. But to the point that it's a problem, I really don't believe it. I think this plan up here, the DEI, caused more problems with racism and equity and inclusion than anything I could have possibly come up with. Because what it does, and I believe it was designed to do that, it was to pit one another against each other. You know why? Because we didn't have a problem.
The Senate's only 2 Democrats offered some opposition. The bill passed the state Senate overwhelmingly, along a party line vote.
This was an easy vote. I don't think it should even be controversial that we treat everyone equally.
That's State Senator Patricia Rucker. She's a Republican and one of 5 women in the Senate. Last year, Rucker authored a similar bill called the Anti-Woke Act, but it never got out of committee. This year is a whole new ballgame.
I think in general, people consider diversity a good thing, inclusion a good thing, equity a good thing. Those are all descriptions that are favorable in anyone's minds if you just say them in isolation. The real concern and problem is a push using the guise of DEI, of those words, to really actually, I think, do reverse discrimination. And as a minority myself, I can tell you, I'm offended. The whole entire DEI push that we have done in this country offends me personally. It is telling me I need help, and that unless someone lowers the standards for me, I can't get to the same place. And that's offensive.
Rucker was born in Venezuela and immigrated to the U.S. with her parents when she was 6 years old.
So I'm a Hispanic, totally 100% Hispanic, and I don't look it. You can't look at me and immediately say, oh, she must be from a South American country. Just like you can see someone who is got a very chocolate colored, and you don't know, are they Hispanic? Are they African? Are they Indian? It's kind of hard to tell, right? They are darker color than maybe I am. Looking at someone like that, you have no idea, did they come from a privileged family or a not privileged family? It's a beautiful thing in the United States of America that we have so many opportunities and choices.
I asked Senator Rucker why the governor has made eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority in West Virginia, one of the country's poorest, unhealthiest, and least diverse states.
The idea that you might not get admitted into a college because you happen to be white, offends people. They don't want that to continue. Or the idea that you're looking at hiring and you must look at the race first before looking at the qualifications, it offends people. So even though I don't think it's a widespread thing that's happening, there was definite discussion about that in election and campaigning and town halls, and folks want that gone. They want everyone to be treated the same and everyone have an equal opportunity to compete.
I'm going to be plain. Yeah. I feel like it seems like a culture war issue to me. And in that it seems like a culture war issue, that seems to be something that politically would resonate with the base, but that may not really address the key concerns of West Virginia.
You do realize that the DEI push has been a cultural war issue. It's been pushed on us. We did not have it previously, and it's been pushed on us because it told us that this is the way we're going to fix racism, and it's only created more racism.
Rucker's referring to racism against white people, often called reverse racism.
And I know that those on the side of the minorities get offended when you say that. But if you're making decisions that favor someone based on their race, that is racism. And I don't care what color you are looking for, you're pushing, you're favoring. If you're favoring a white person over a black person, that's racism. If you're favoring a black person over a white person, it is still racism.
It became clear to me that Senator Rucker does not view racism or even discrimination through the same lens as many in West Virginia's African American community. In fact, people we interviewed for this story, both African American and white, are alarmed about the governor's bill and what they call its intentionally vague definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion as discriminatory. They questioned why a bill eliminating DEI is necessary in overwhelmingly white West Virginia, and they wanted to prevent it from becoming law.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the bill? Delegate Hamilton.
One of the last stops for the governor's DEI bill before it was approved by lawmakers was in the House of Delegates Education Committee. Just before the vote, Delegate Anitra Hamilton spoke against the bill as an unnecessary political maneuver.
I think this is a poor piece of legislation that is written to divide us. I think that anytime you write legislation and put in policies that's based on the feelings of people, it will always land you in trouble because feelings are subjective.
Delegate Hamilton, a Democrat, is the only African-American woman in the West Virginia legislature.
At the end of the day, this bill is divisive. There is no need for it. Some of the ghosts of our past we keep alive because we won't deal with issues. DEI, we don't have this problem in West Virginia. We create these problems. And when we do have the problems, we won't stand for what's right. Today I'm standing and I'm going to be on the right side of history because it matters. It's offensive. It's offensive to me. It's offensive to my ancestors. My great-great-grandfather was a slave. That's how my family got here. But no one else has that testimony in here. DEI matters. At some point, West Virginia has to move beyond this. And why we got to have this legislation coming from the governor's office, I do not know. I'm against it. I will always be against it. Vote your pleasure. It's a no for me.
For many in West Virginia's black community, the passage of this law is personal. Like Anitra Hamilton just said, they feel their rights are being taken away, and people are angry.
We're not just going to roll over and say, okay, all is lost. We can't do anything. We're back in slavery. We no longer have the right to vote. We don't have the right to speak. We no longer have our constitutional rights. No, we're going to push back.
Reverend Matthew Watts is a longtime activist and a regular guest on this show. He says West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey has not articulated the problem that he's trying to fix with his anti-DEI bill.
He produced no data, no information, no statistics, no witnesses. He didn't even tell any anecdotal stories as to why diversity, equity, and inclusion is a problem.
Watts says the governor's bill eliminating DEI is an appeasement to President Trump's agenda.
I can only say I live in West Virginia. It doesn't apply here. It's dangerous here. It's divisive here. It will be destructive here. It will hurt this state. And I believe that if you give people truth, facts, and information, the people in the state of West Virginia, they will see through this, right?
While the bill was still in play at the legislature, Watts teamed up with the state's NAACP to strategize against it. They hosted a town hall meeting at Grace Bible Church in Charleston, where Watts is pastor. They invited lawmakers, including Delegate Hamilton, as well as clergy from West Virginia's black community.
Good evening.
The meeting was held on the 57th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
So we gathered here today because the question is, will the destruction of diversity, equity, and inclusion kill the dream?
As the meeting got underway, Karen Williams from the local NAACP's Political Action Committee said the evening's goal was to come up with a plan to stop the bill from passing.
We cannot be silent anymore. We have to have a response when they talk about erasing history, when they don't even understand the definition of DEI. And we have to get that clear. We're going to clarify that because it's not just a black face. You have women who have benefited from DEI more than anyone. You have special education. You have handicapped people. You have veterans. You have all of these groups. But then when they talk about DEI, they talk about doing away with our history.
Williams is referring to the recent controversy of federal agencies removing references to famous Black Americans from government websites as a part of the ban on DEI. Historical figures caught up in these actions include baseball legend Jackie Robinson, the Tuskegee Airmen, and abolitionist Harriet Tubman, and others. After public outcry, information about these historic Americans was put back up on government websites. The energy at this town hall was tense at times, a sign that frustration was coursing through the community.
Can we get done with all the sanitized talk now? We can come up with plans and all of that, and that's cool. But we're dealing with racists. There's no reasoning with these people.
Reverend Marlon Collins from Shiloh Baptist Church admits he's not about being politically correct. Collins expressed frustration that the community has not been standing up and speaking out. He says people need to understand that the DEI bill is a first step toward overt resegregation.
They right in front of our doggone face. Executive orders to take Black history out of the Smithsonian, not even under the table. We still don't have a plan. All of the people who are Black at my mother's age, my father's age, all of the people who were white, who marched with them and got hoses sprayed on them, they're going to vote. Who we need are the people who have new ideas, who have new energy. It ain't the we shall overcome energy. It's the we kicking the hell the door in energy.
Many people attended the meeting hoping for clarity. But instead, there was a sense of nervous energy and frustration about the uncertainty over what might happen next. Demographic projections say that in about 15 to 20 years, sometime between 2040 and 2050, the United States will be a majority-minority country. For the first time, the category known as non-Hispanic white people will drop to less than 50% of the country's population. Several U.S. states and territories are already majority-minority. Many people believe that diversity efforts will continue, just under a different name. But how? Companies that want to attract and build a diverse workforce will have to get creative about how they recruit and mentor new employees and what they'll call their programs. DEI is off the table now, of course. It's not only tainted, it's a target. The acronym and the words diversity, equity, and inclusion are being hunted down and removed from federal government websites and all written communications and materials. As we close up this episode, I'm struck by something Felicia Bush said to me. We met Felicia at the top of the show as we discussed the Us and Them DEI Advisory Board. You'll recall that Felicia is a mental health professional. She believes what's driving this current backlash, this blitz to eliminate DEI, is fear.
I think that when you're raised a certain way, when you've been allowed to have history edited for you for your comfort, then it's a fear of change.
But are you speaking specifically about white people?
I'm speaking about the fear of others. In West Virginia, yes, it's the majority of white people. They're the majority. But obviously, it can apply to many different groups of people. It's almost a mindset. So I think that there are some of us, some races, some groups of people who have not had the luxury of allowing our fear to stop us because you had to live day to day in it. But I do believe that specifically for white males who are used to the assumption that they, by virtue of being white and male, are better than everyone else. That fear, I think that fear's changing the world back 50 years. So that is what I am referring to. It's that fear. And I think I said to you that, the fear that if the playing field is level, they'd be escorted off of it. I don't believe that's true. It's not true. As Americans, it's not true. We can shine by our own individual endeavor, but we have to recognize that some people haven't been given the same opportunity, not to education, not to build generational wealth, so they're not at the same place. And for me, whatever brings you forward doesn't take me back. That's not how I view life. But there are those who that's the only way they view life. If you're winning, I'm losing. That's the fear I'm talking about.
I hear that. This debate does feel like a zero-sum game, a scarcity mindset. Felicia's perspective is important. We need voices from everyone, and we need to take a hard look at ourselves and the world we're creating together. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this episode is me, Trey Kay, Marisa Helms, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to David Freisen, Phyllis Arnold, Reverend Ronald English, Jonathan Zimmerman, Michael Pushkin, Shantae Ellis, Clinton Arnold, and Kristen Olson. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Ahmed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, and the CRC Foundation. Hey, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Would you write to us on our Facebook page or on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Us Them Podcast. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.